Hey everybody, welcome to a midweek conversation. We've got a very special returning celebrity.
A lot of people call me special. Different reasons. Yes.
This is the reunion video that the internet's been demanding. The original podcast for Community Bible Church.
It's a throwback.
6 years old. Wow. We're old.
I got more gray hair than you do.
No, I've got a hat on. But they're up there.
You got some pretty shiny ones.
That's what I mean.
Look at that.
They're there.
No, I don't. You look good.
We're old.
You look great. But look at my beard.
Oh, if my beard came in, you'd see gray more, I'm sure.
Well, I guess it's a blessing and a curse.
Blessing. Hey, we earned these gray hairs.
But yeah, the internet has been demanding this, I think. I just found out about it, though. Thanks for asking me this morning if I was busy.
That's what it's like to be my friend. Hey, what are you doing this afternoon? You gonna come film a video? No. So this past Sunday, right, we wrapped up Colossians. We were looking at the final greeting in Paul's letter, and I admitted to people it's the section of letters of epistles that I tend to skim through the fastest, right? Because I'm like, oh, they're just listing out everybody's names. But over the last couple of years, really making sure that I'm truly spending time with every verse and recognizing that, wow, in the conclusion to the letter, you see some really beautiful encouragement of one church being aware of another church. And so part of the sermon is talking about the blessing of when the church is aware of one another. And so we're like, man, let's get another pastor in the area on. And so I want to give you a chance, what's going on in Shelby, that we can rejoice with you and celebrate you and be encouraged by what God is doing through another expression of his bride.
This past Sunday is exactly 4 years of when I took the position of lead pastor.
Dude, that's wild.
Exactly 4 years. So good time to ask. In the past 4 years, lots of change.
Yeah.
I mean, when you took on the role of lead pastor was during COVID, and I took on the role of lead pastor a year after COVID, yeah. But also the church was without a pastor that whole time. So basically Easter of 2020 was also the final day of their lead pastor being in that role. So during COVID, without a lead pastor, once I got there, it was a lot of it was shut down.
Yeah.
Some ministries actually shut down for a little bit. Some hadn't been restarted yet. So we tried to bring new life into it just to do something. Yeah. I wouldn't say that we had all the answers or everything figured out. But in the midst of that, over the past 4 years, I think we've met a lot of stereotypes of the typical life cycle of when a new pastor arrives and kind of working out like, well, do we want to stay here with him or do we want to find somewhere else to go? And 2023 was a really rough year. We lost a lot of people for various reasons. And 2024, end of 2024, but especially in 2025, I feel like we've finally started to find our identity as a congregation. And I still don't know what in the world I'm doing, but in my inadequacy, I feel like God is working through all of us, because right now I feel like we're in a point where we're kind of launching into the role he has for us in that community. It does feel like a switch has been flipped, and the only way to explain it is that God is actually at work, because it's not some great plan we've come up with or strategies and structure within the ministry. That's, well, we've done this, and now here's the result. And we can prove that. Really, we look back over the past 4 years and we're like, I don't know. Like, there were some good things, there were some bad things, things we rejoiced over, some things that we wept over and had a lot of questions. But here we are 4 years later, and we just know God's in control.
That's awesome.
So it's right now we're in that point of hopefully as I continue my tenure there, it's just solidifying that this was God's calling. Yeah. That's where I would be, and to be a part of that congregation and serve those people.
Dude, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's you and I were just talking about, right, stepping into a church without a pastor, going through COVID, and then all of a sudden, okay, here's a new leadership voice. Like, there is no option other than, Lord, please lead this, because you're trying to introduce yourself to them and build that credibility. and they're trying to figure out how do we come out of what we just came out of and now welcome in a new family and stuff like. So that's good. How can we be praying for Shelby? How can we be, one of the things we looked at in Colossians, if you missed the message or if you need a reminder, is, not only are we encouraged and comforted knowing about other churches, but it also enables us to pray for them better.
Right now, what we're praying for, and I would love any more prayers on our behalf, would be that we can kind of iron out the next chapter, because we know that, yes, I can say that right now we're rejoicing and celebrating the state that we're in, but I know that it can't stay there. Like it's kind of like getting comfortable. Yeah. But in my experience, a lot of times once you get to that point of being comfortable and used to something, it's time to take the next step. Yeah. To kind of step out of your comfort zone. Because if I'm honest with you, I'd almost love to just say, let's just stay here for 30 years and let me retire. Like, I enjoy the relationships, the friendships. We don't have any big worries about finances or attendance. Like that's just not the stuff we're worried about. So our prayer is to iron out, well, what has God had next for us? He's gotten us to this point, but how are we supposed to reach the lost? What do we need to focus on? That's kind of our prayer, and our hope in that prayer is that by the end of this year, we'll be able to kind of have that more clear. Not to say that God always gives you 100% clarity on every decision, but if we could have peace about it, that would be great. Of whatever the next step is, as there's a lot of lost people that need the gospel. So there's a lot of other good churches. We're not trying to compete with other churches, but we know that not everyone's actually being given the true gospel, and also they're not being led in a way that challenges them to become more like Christ. Yeah. So that we want to be that place, so that families can be transformed in the image of Christ, and marriages will begin to look like they were intended to be. Yeah. So that children have a place to be raised in a home that is raised in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. So we want to be that place in our community.
Dude, I love it. I absolutely love it. We just, a couple weeks ago in Colossians, we were looking at, husbands, wives, children, parents, the verses in chapter 4 or chapter 3 verses in chapter 3 that talk about those things. And that's where we're like, okay, does the marriage reflect the marriage of Jesus in the church? So I love that that's the vision. What would you say to somebody who, they're hearing this and they maybe realize the mindset you just talked about, right? We're not trying to compete with other churches. We're not like, this isn't a us versus you mentality.
Well, the only church I compete with is your church.
Okay, good. That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
No, go finish your question. I was going to make a comment, but go ahead and finish.
So I had similar conversations Sunday, because Sunday we listed out. I said, hey, I had sent a text to some buddies in the area. What's going on in your church? And we prayed for other churches in the area. And some people were like, man, that's just not how I was raised. I was raised in the church where it was like, you talk bad about other churches and you look down on other churches and you make fun of other churches. What would you say to somebody who's realizing that's how I was raised? How do I shift my attitude towards the other churches in the area?
I pray for God to humble you, because I was like that. I was what I would consider a Pharisee, where I saw the other churches and how much error they were in. I would look at their practices, their habits, and think, well, they're doing church all wrong. Now that I've grown up, I'm seeing, yes, we have some differences, but it doesn't always mean they're the enemy. Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't even have all of my preferences in place at our church.
I don't think anybody does.
I'm the oddball where I love Southern gospel bluegrass music. I think I'm the only one at my church that likes that. But when I was younger, I would think, man, if your church doesn't sing Southern gospel, you're in sin. Yeah. That's how extreme I took that. So I think God has humbled me through circumstances and situations to think that, you know what, James, you don't know everything. You don't have it all figured out. So I'm a little more humble when I do look at other churches to say, you know what, they're different. I may not agree with everything, but that doesn't always mean they're on opposing sides of it. I think there's going to be a lot more variety in heaven than what I'm comfortable with.
I think it's a good phrase, right? Nobody's getting their own prep. Like, if you've got a church of 100 people and said, hey, create your ideal, your perfect ideal Sunday service, my guess is you would get 100 different designs, right? If you had a church of 2 people and you said, create your ideal service, my guess is you'd get 2 different designs. And so I think that humility is a big component. Anything else? Okay, so God has humbled me. How do I now grow in my affection for other churches? And, because certainly we're not advocating, just start bouncing around churches. You know what I mean? Like,
right. That's a good question. And we're doing this on the fly.
Yeah.
I didn't have a chance to prepare an answer. But I think the more we can grow in our relationship with God, the less we will worry about the differences we have with even the people we do attend church with, or the church down the road. But I don't know how to grow in partnership, though. It's weird because there are churches that I'm friendly with, but it's hard. Actually, I had a meeting with a pastor about a year ago who's been in Shelby for about 30 years as a lead pastor, and asked him that same question, like, how in the world can we grow in our participation and camaraderie as churches? And he gave me an example from the 90s of how they used to do it. But his response when I asked him, well, do you think it's possible to happen again? He says no. But my whole point in meeting with him was to get an answer of yes, and okay, let's do it.
Let's go after it.
But he's like, in my experience, that we have divided ourselves over so many things, he doesn't see it as possible to go back to what was happening in the 90s. Yeah. I still hold out hope that it's possible, but I don't have the answer yet.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes we do have to face the reality of addressing an uncomfortable truth, and I think I like both sides, right? I like that you're on the side of I have hope that it's possible, and I think he's right that we're seeing a lot of resistance to it. I even think back to when, and this was back when you were here, when we participated in the March of Prayer, or what was it called, Walk of Prayer, or whatever.
I think March of Prayer, because it was during March leading up to Easter.
Yeah, March of Prayer. And, we hosted it 2 years in a row. Our church was participated in it, and we would host a night and stuff. And, I remember seeing our people come out to ours that we hosted, and my wife and I was before kids, so we had max flexibility with our schedule. So we went to some other nights at other churches, and it was like not our people, right? It was all the people who went to that church. And I remember talking to one of the guys who was helping organizing it, and I was like, hey, what kind of results have you seen? And he's like, it's funny, every church says, this is great, we'll go around all the different churches, and what we see is the vast majority come out for the night their church hosts it, and then none of the other nights, right? Like, we've got the same cluster of maybe 10 people who go around, but everybody else loves the idea.
If it's at their church.
Yeah. And so I think part of it is people. It's going to require not just the pastors being friends, but the people being friends and being willing to be friends and be friendly with and rub shoulders with. And I think, like you said, not to lose the hope of it and the vision of it and the dream of it, not to just say, with an air of resignation, fine, I guess then we just won't even pursue it.
So I think as leaders, we can model it. I'm not sure if it'll produce the result of very tangible teamwork.
Yeah.
But if we model it, at least maybe that'll have the effect of reducing the competition mindset of well, this is my church and here's another church and here's everything they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
So because that was modeled in the pulpit for my church growing up. So at least if we don't add to the fire, maybe it'll die out.
Maybe, yeah. If we stop adding fuel to the flames, they'll eventually flicker and fade, right? And like you said, not that it has to be, I'm not saying that okay, we're one church, you're one church, right? I can think of another half a dozen guys easily that I could text right now. I'm not saying that we have to be doing, one joint service with you and the next week a joint service with them and the next week a joint service with them. But, because I don't think you see that in Scripture. You know what I mean? Like, Paul's not saying, like, hey, and then they're going to come your way for a cookout, and then you guys go over to the church at Laodicea for a, event. But there's that bond at the heart level. Like, we care about what's going on in your ministry. We're aware of your ministry. We're praying for your ministry. We're excited by your ministry. We're not trying to pick people from your ministry or downplay your ministry. I think it is more of I genuinely support your ministry however I can.
I think it's easier with distance too.
Yeah.
Because if it is just a church on the other block, there's a sense of proximity competition. And I hate to say that.
No, that's real. And I think it's unfortunately because the American church has equated size with health and success, right? Like, oh, well, that's a good church because they're a big church. And so
I've heard some people say the opposite, though.
I personally...
The only way you can be a biblical church is to be small.
I've heard that. I know my size preferences, but what I always say to people is, look, I know biblical healthy churches that are really, really big, and I know biblically healthy churches that are really, really small, and I know unhealthy churches that are really big, and I know unhealthy churches that are small, right? So I don't think health is automatically a part of being big or small. I think we've wrongly equated the goal of like a local body is to just get as big as possible, not to create disciples who go out and advance the kingdom of Christ, not to shepherd people into increasing maturity in their walk with the Lord, but just be as big as possible. So if my goal as a local church is to be as big as possible and your church is a block down the road, well, you're now getting in the way of my goal.
Right.
And we've got to flip that switch of...
Dude, I've heard horror stories of churches like abusing Google ads and Facebook ads. And what they'll do is target geolocation around another church so that when somebody gets close to that building and they're on Facebook, it'll start showing ads for their church. Like, isn't that crazy?
Manipulating ads, buying billboards in front of other churches. I know horror stories of pastors literally recruiting people away. Like, hey, I know you're at your church. We can do that, but better. You should come over. Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
How have we lost sight of the point of church? So I was excited to have you on and like you said, kind of set that standard of like, this is my brother. Like, if you and I sat down to plan a church service, we would probably disagree on what song to put where or even what song to sing. Got to be honest, I wouldn't pick a whole lot of bluegrass like Southern, right? But that's okay. And so, yeah, hopefully leadership can step up and set a standard of, man, be part of each other's lives on a big kingdom-minded level, right? Like, this is what really matters.
No, I think in our situation where this was our church home, there was a sense where we didn't want to leave because we loved it here. And to be honest with you, this was easy. Community Bible Church for us was easy. I know it wasn't perfect. Obviously, we went through a lot of weird stuff. But it was God's calling to leave. And like I said, now 4 years after the fact, we're starting to see the results of that. Because it wasn't like we left and it was immediate blessing and that we're like, oh, well, then surely this is where God wanted us. No, it was hard for quite a while. But the big picture is that, one, we tried to be as open in communication as possible when we started noticing that God was moving. I mean, I switched from youth ministry to men's ministry.
You walked into my office that one day and you were like, hey, dude, I think God's shifting the calling on my heart. Let's talk about this. Yeah, great.
And then putting our application in another church and ended up being the church we're at now. And then they received the application, decided to go a different direction, and then coming back to you guys to say, hey, this is what's happened. All right. So we're just going to continue on in the men's ministry. And I think the idea was to go into small groups too. But and then when it finally came time, okay, it's official. Like, they have asked us to come to their church to lead. You guys sent us very well. So there wasn't any sense of like, well, they're just leaving because they're upset about this and that. Our hearts were discontent because that was what was happening.
You're the first person I did ministry with. Like, this is This is my brother.
So I guess my encouragement in our experience is, yeah, we don't have to be competitive, and it doesn't have to be toxic when God leads you somewhere else.
No, not at all.
We have to keep our mind big kingdom to think, well, the church is always moving pieces around. God, I think God is orchestrating the whole plan the way he needs it to work out. And sometimes that means shifting people around too.
Yep.
Our church does not ever see your church. Now, we do have a little bit of a benefit of being 10 miles away.
We're a little bit further
so
away.
People who are coming to this church from
there.
Ontario, Lexington, they're probably not driving to Shelby.
Because now when I meet people who are closer to you, like I hate when someone's like, hey, this is the area I live. Can you recommend a church in the area? And I'm like, I don't know anybody. So I love now when I'm like, people are like, hey, I live up by Shelby or past Shelby. Like, do you know any churches? And they're like, yeah, this is James, like, right? Shelby Alliance. Look up James.
Yeah.
Great guy. Loves God. Loves the word. Like, go there. Right, like
redneck as can be.
Redneck, like he will.
So if you're okay with a little bit of hillbilly,
he'll pull into the church parking lot on a dirt bike. Like, but you're right. It's good because it's about big kingdom, not our little fiefdom.
Yeah. So I pray that that's the heart of every leader. I know it's not, but I pray that that's what it would be.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, if you guys have any questions, comments that you'd love to see two pastors from two different churches talk about, let us know. But yeah, thanks for being here, man. Thanks for repping Shelby.
I'm glad to be back.
We're praying for you guys. We're excited.
Thanks for
what
lunch.
God's doing.
You bought me some Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, dude.
So I didn't even want to do the podcast. You offered lunch, so I was like, let's go grab some wings, and if I have to talk on a mic for a few minutes, so be it. It's the effort I put in.
I'm not above bribing with food. Because I
got a coffee.
You got a coffee? I didn't make you the coffee.
I actually needed the coffee.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, Pastor Sam. Thanks so much for joining us on a midweek conversation. We hope it challenged you, encouraged you, kept this past Sunday's message at the front of our hearts and minds throughout the week. As always, if you have questions or comments you'd like us to discuss, please let us know. Otherwise, you can find more content like this here on our channel. Make sure you subscribe to stay up to date, and we'll see you next time.